Welcome to So What's It Actually About? I'm your host, Margie and I, along with my wide array of guests, hope to help you better understand and weather the wonderful world of actuarial science. Hello and welcome to the last episode of this season, but also the last episode of this podcast. And so I am joined with Andrew, who was my first guest on the first season of this podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
So I want to start today's discussion around a very significant event that happened in your life yesterday. You graduated with your BSc in actuarial science. So congrats.
Thank you.
Speak to how that felt.
You know, so I've obviously taken this year to do external exams. So I've been focusing a lot on studying.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just a surreal feeling to be like, oh, I'm graduating tomorrow. And I think I was actually chatting to one of my friends who's also in the same boat as me, doing external exams through ActSci. And we both sort of realized it's something which only settled later, is that we actually have something to be proud of, even though we didn't make it into honors.
Sure.
So I think, actually just being able to attend the graduation ceremony, have my friends, fellow sufferers along the way there, it felt like a moment to actually be proud of something.
Yeah, I so enjoyed watching it. It's actually quite a emotional thing watching, knowing that you had to fight really hard and also just reflecting on that period of my life. What did it feel like walking across the stage?
You expect maybe like, you're to be able to hear a pin drop or something, but it's just a moment of walking across and quite literally in the moment just being proud of what you've done.
Yeah.
Proud that you're there. And, for me, thankful to the Lord. Because I honestly couldn't have gone through this without him and the support of you, family. So that feeling of walking across was quite, simple but beautiful.
Yeah, and a little bit relieving, right?
Yeah, we can't take it away now.
Just try. But I think let's speak to your experience this year. You said you're writing the exams, your board exams through ActSci, and obviously that comes with its own challenges, its own admin, new studying techniques, new structures that you've had to put in place for yourself, not being in a formal course at a university. Can you just speak to sort of how that experience has been, some of your challenges, etc.?
So I think from the word go, one of my first sort of suspicions was that it was going to be really difficult to gauge how much to get through each day and constantly feeling like you're behind.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's just a unique experience to me, but generally when you set aside the time each day consistently, you can actually get through a lot of work. Because even though I'd gone through the AE syllabus, the actuarial economics syllabus before, so I was familiar with it, which gives me an edge. I did cover it in about a month and a half, 2 months. And that's not through having an amazing brain at all. It's literally just put in consistent efforts each day and you'll be able to cover the syllabus. Yeah. So I'd say to anyone who's attempting it or registering for exams, just register early so that you can get that off your plate. There was a technicality this year where the maths of finance, there was a prerequisite, the A211 prerequisite.
Yes.
Which basically means you needed a university pass for maths of finance to be able to do communications or attempt quite a few others.
Yeah.
And initially I thought, because I'd just missed it, so I'd actually got a university pass, but when I was actually interacting with the ActSci Society, there was a slight technicality difference.
Yes.
And I think it's just because it was a new policy.
Yeah.
But they thought that a pass was you got the exemption. So I was like,
and they're not two. There's two. There's
but
two
a university
levels.
pass gets you to. So I think just be aware. I think once you get all those news bites from ActSci in the emails, just scroll through them and be like, what's changing in the subjects?
Yeah, and be aware of it and on top of it.
Just be abreast of it. Yeah.
And what challenges have you found with sort of that whole registration process? And even now thinking through having to write your exams online, how has that process been?
I think two things that can be very helpful is just make sure you're chatting to your friends, because they're going to be people in the same boat as you.
Yes. Inevitably.
Yeah, so just chat with them, say, how have you done this? Because often one person is really good at navigating things, and then you can sort of piggyback on them and understand what they're doing, and then you can go and seek out counsel and, okay, this is how I resolve this issue. So it's just, you troubleshoot faster when you're together.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I would say is just make sure you're chatting to people who are actually authorities in the subject. Because I remember as soon as I got that, you didn't get the pass, the actual exemption for maths or finance. I went straight to Steve and sent him a message. And I just said, look, this is my scenario. Is this the correct interpretation? Yeah. And immediately said, no, you are in the boat to be able to write. So that was just a nice way of not panicking, but just go to the people with authority who know, and then you're fine.
Yeah. And tell me, what have you done to help structure your time? I mean, you've talked about you've got through a lot of content, etc., but you're having to be very self-disciplined in the sense that you're not going to lectures, that sort of thing. You could technically waste the odd day or whatever.
Sure.
How have you structured your time so that you get the most out of it and give your exams like a proper go?
Yeah. I think one thing is not having lectures. So obviously I've had 4 years previously where it was completely structured. I had, time slots to attend. And then suddenly now that's all been taken away.
Yeah.
For me, initially it was a bit daunting, but I've actually kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Because you do need to give yourself a break. So you need to say, okay, between this time and this time of the day is a break.
Yeah.
But make sure that you're working consistently throughout the rest.
And also takes practice, right? Initially it's going to feel a bit like, it was a bit much in a day, or I didn't get to what I wanted to, but you kind of just keep at it and then go from there.
I mean, there's diminishing returns on your, I suppose, study time. The longer it is, the less you're absorbing.
Yeah.
So just make sure you're having regular short breaks.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. I think, given that this is the last podcast for the season and for the overall podcast, I think I had asked you to come with a couple of questions so that we can just kind of, end it off and sort of wish our listeners well. So what were some of the questions that you thought of?
I think it's what everybody's asking. Why are you stopping?
So it's been an incredible journey for me. I think I've really enjoyed the project. I think I've learned a lot through it. Also learning to put myself out there, even when I didn't feel that I was necessarily the best equipped person to do it. But I think, I originally started this to give students exposure to actuarial science and to show them that it's so much more than I think most people think it is. And I think it's been incredible to have such varied opinions and input, but I think I have met the KPIs that I set out to meet. But also I'm in a stage in my life now where I'm transitioning jobs. I'm moving back to Joburg, and some personal adventures are also taking off, and so I think it's not that I'll never do it again, but it's just putting it down for now. And maybe I'll pick it up again, and that's why this episode is actually going to be called Time In. So it's not time end, it's time in, and it's saying, the term has maybe run its course now, but that doesn't mean I won't renew it at a later stage.
Sure. Okay, that's, at least we can hold out hope. Throughout this process, I've just heard some of the people you've interviewed and just some of the most interesting actuaries, interesting people, some of the most perseverant people.
Yeah.
What have you learned in general about the profession that you didn't know by yourself?
I think it's something that I knew, but I'd never really taken to heart, is that an actuary who is just an actuary is not an actuary. And I think seeing the various places that my guests sort of play in, and the ways that they're contributing to society and they're impacting various stakeholders, etc., I think that has been such an amazing thing to experience, because it's something that I knew in my head, but to actually engage with people's stories, which I think often touches your heart, I think has been very different for me, and an unexpected joy. I think also in many ways reigniting the joy in actuarial science, which I think I hadn't sort of thought I'd lost. But
it's not yourself.
Exactly.
It's just all the grueling work.
And maybe the podcast was the Patronus, continuing on that kind of analogy. But it was just, I think it was just so incredible to see the diversity of people that could be actuaries and the incredible work that they do. And I think so often I would sit and interview someone and be so inspired by their journeys and realizing that every person struggled and every person has kind of navigated their career differently and is solving different problems. I think that was just an immense blessing to actually be part of that.
Sure. And I suppose I remember from our first episode, you said, when you think actuary, what do you think? Just define what you do.
Yeah.
And I think maybe to do full circle on that,
Sure.
that essentially you could have said that question was just asking, what is that stereotypical mold that actuaries fit into?
Yeah.
What have you found? I suppose it's a different question, but
yes.
What have you found to be some of the different mold breaking characteristics of actuaries?
Sure. It's a great question. I think something that I've realized is that people kind of always think actuary, pricing, reserving, evaluating. And having spoken to various people, actuaries are educators. Actuaries are leaders. Actuaries are entrepreneurs. Actuaries are policymakers. Actuaries are kind of strategic minds. Actuaries help protect systems in various ways. And something that stands out to me is like when you think about enterprise risk actuaries, and they can play in any business. Sure. That business doesn't even have to be an insurance business because risk manifests everywhere. And so I think actuaries are problem solvers at the core, right? But life is a problem, and on many different levels. Don't read too much into that, like an existential crisis. But life is a problem, and as a problem solver, then it means that there's always something for you to do. And seeing that actuaries can play out in all those different spaces, I think has been incredible relief. Because I think also I don't consider myself a conventional actuary. My hunt has always very much been for people and to educate them and help them towards their goals. And they didn't seem like a strictly actuarial sort of endeavor. And yet I realized that what I'm doing is I'm solving a problem, which is actuarial. And so it's, I think in some ways been soothing to be like, oh, I'm actually an actuary, so that's been a kind of a strange kind of mindset shift for me.
Sure. And amongst all the amazing people that you interviewed, what were some highlights, just interviews that you weren't even expecting to go so well that were just so life-giving?
I think the interviews that I enjoyed the most is where people were really open and vulnerable about the things that they had struggled with in becoming an actuary and the sort of the risks that they had taken from a personal perspective in order to pursue what they found meaningful. And I think, there's various examples throughout the 2 seasons where people say, I was in a role and I was like, I actually can't do this for the rest of my life. Sure. And then they forfeit, whether that was income, whether that was prestige, whether that was whatever, to actually go do a role that they felt was going to be more personally fulfilling. And that for me was the stories that stood out the most, because it's saying, actuaries, yes, they earn a lot of money. Yes, they stand in very sort of prominent positions, but you're a person. Yeah. And so the things that you want as a person and you find meaningful need to come into that equation. Yeah. And I really respect and admire the actuaries. And there's various examples. If you listen to the podcast, they'll probably pop into your mind. Yeah. But there's various examples of where people have done that. And I respect that bravery, because that's something that I think I aspire to be like. That's the type of actuary I want to be. And so seeing people be those actuaries, I take heart, because I'm like, okay, they're out there, they're doing it, it's possible, I can join their ranks.
It's fantastic. That really is wonderful.
Any other questions? I can't believe it's the end.
I can't believe it's the end. Just in terms of when you set up with this podcast, I think maybe it's like just a last closing question. Did you expect it to do this well?
I didn't. I think, for me, the heart behind the podcast, there was sort of 2 hearts. The first heart, and I think the largest sort of atrium of the heart, if you want to get into the anatomy of it, was very much trying to encourage you and the love and support that I had towards you, and knowing that I can't write your exams for you, but I could do something that would support you. So that was sort of the biggest part of it. But then expanding from that is that you are one of many that are on this journey and wanting to become an actuary. And there's various sort of potholes and barriers that people have to encounter in order to get there, and to say, well, having these conversations that can help